Friends, if you have been following along with the summer reading challenge that we issued at the beginning of June and have actually stayed on course to read all 4 Gospels in the 3 months of summer, congratulations, because you're a lot more disciplined at daily Bible reading than I am. But if you have indeed been doing this and read the first 3 Gospels before getting to the Gospel of John, you've probably noticed that John is a little different from the others. Even just in worship, the length of the texts that Pastor Will preached on last week and now this week are really long. John often takes 100 words to say what Mark probably could have said in 10. And this episode from the Gospel of John that we're focusing on is 44 verses long. And when I was trying to decide on what part of this chapter to focus on this week, I even had to cut some right out of the middle, because it's one of those times where Jesus is trying to explain to the disciples the meaning of what is about to happen, and it just really doesn't fit. It messes with the flow of the narrative. But when you get right down to it, essentially what this passage is about is death. In this story, we get a front row seat to observe Jesus' relationship with death. And not his own death, as we're accustomed to recounting on Good Friday. No, this is the death of someone that Jesus loved. And I'm sure that most of us here have lived through the death of someone that we love. It could have been a grandparent, a parent, a sibling, a close friend, or even a child. I'm sure we've all lost someone close to us. And even if you're fortunate enough to not have experienced this, I hate to be the one breaking this to you, but you will at some point. I'm very open about my own life and my own experiences with death here, and especially with our youth. And I can tell you that I have lived through the death of both of my parents. Each of them died many years apart, and just a few months ago, my family lost my uncle, who really had stepped in and filled the void for my parents for several years. And I can tell you from experience that it doesn't get any easier the more you experience it. One of the things about death that we don't really talk very often about is just how weird and awkward it is. No matter how long we've been waiting or even expecting someone to die, we are never really prepared for the reality of death. And sometimes we don't even really know how we actually feel. Yes, it is sad, but that one word and that one emotion doesn't come close to actually capturing the entirety of the feelings we possess after someone close to us dies. It's often a strange combination of sadness, anger, grief, loss, and numbness. And we can see a lot of these mixed feelings playing out here in the text that Pastor Gietra read for us. Once Jesus finally arrives, Martha goes out to meet him, and they don't exchange pleasantries. There's no hug. Instead, the first words out of Martha's mouth that greet Jesus are, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And when I read this, I imagine Martha is pretty angry, and rightfully so. Eventually, her sister, Mary, joins them and similarly greets Jesus with the exact same words. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And another way that John is different than the rest of the Gospels is that in at least 2 of them, Jesus tries to keep his divine identity a secret. And that is not the case in this gospel. Jesus often talks at length about his divine identity. And Mary and Martha know this. Martha explicitly says in verse 27, "Yes, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God." They're angry at God. Have you ever been angry at God? I have. And it's usually not an indication that things are going well in my life. There are some Christians who would say that to be angry with God is a sign of weak faith, or that those who get angry at God just don't understand the bigger picture of what is happening. But that is not how Jesus responds in this passage. Instead, we read that after Mary and everyone else that shows up, Jesus was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He noticed the raw emotional pain around him, and Jesus himself loved Lazarus, as the text says. And with that information, and with the casual relationship between Jesus and these sisters, we can imply that Jesus was a close friend to all three of them. Even the Son of God is not immune from the turmoil and agony we experience as humans when somebody we love dies. After asking where Lazarus has been laid, we read that Jesus also began to weep. Remember, in this gospel, Jesus is not shy about showing off his divinity. Even in the verses we skipped over this morning, Jesus explains to the disciples that Lazarus' illness will not lead to death. He knows that he is about to raise Lazarus to life and still takes time to sit and cry and let these emotions out. Jesus is suffering emotional pain in these few words. And John 11:35 is famous for being the shortest verse in the entire Bible, but it says a whole lot. Theologian Jürgen Moltmann writes extensively about how the suffering of Jesus very fundamentally changes the relationship between Jesus and God the Father, the first person of the Trinity. Through God becoming human in Jesus Christ, this expands the knowledge of God because God didn't know what it was like to be human. And if we apply this logic to the text for this morning that we read in John's Gospel, God didn't know what it was like to experience the death of somebody he loved as a human until this moment. God hadn't experienced seeing people that he loved deeply grieving until that moment. You see, because they are one and the same, Jesus' suffering is God's suffering. God took time to weep and cry with those close to him because of the pain that they experienced after the death of their friend and brother. And remember when I said that Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead? It's about 2 minutes ago. Jesus knew that he was about to raise his friend back to life, and yet still stopped and cried. At our last youth retreat back in February, I shared with a room full of teenagers that being a Christian is not like going to see a Marvel movie. There's no surprise twist at the end. And we don't have to wait a year to find out what happens, like we had to wait a year between Infinity War and Endgame. These are superhero movies, for those of you that don't know. As Christians, we already know the end of the story. We know that at some point in the future, Christ will return, and there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and there we will live with God in perfect communion. We know that there will be a time when all things and all people are restored to right relationship with God. But it's the part between now and whenever that happens in the future, that's the tough part. And it just so happens that that is the part in history where we find ourselves now. Still, even having the confidence we do as Christians in knowing that we will see our loved ones again doesn't make losing them any easier. So just as Jesus took time to cry, beloved, I really hope that in experiencing the death of someone you love, that you take the time to cry and to be angry with God if you need to. Knowing the end doesn't make experiencing the death of someone close to us any less painful. It doesn't keep death from being any less weird or awkward either. After experiencing the death of someone close to us, even after having taken the time to cry and to grieve, it's still awkward to bring it up. You don't really know how to tell other people a lot of the time. Don't bring up your dead parents at a party. It really puts a damper on the mood. And even when other people share the news of that they lost someone there that is close to them, we still don't really know how to respond. We say things like, oh, I'm so sorry if there's anything I can do, even though we know there is nothing that we can do. Sometimes, if anyone shares this news with you, the best thing to do sometimes is to not say anything and to just sit and feel their pain with them. I would like to think that that is what Jesus does still today, just like he did with Mary and Martha in this story. Jesus wept because of the pain he felt at the death of someone he loved, and at seeing the agony on the face of others that he loved. And I hope you already know that Jesus loves you just as much as Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. God suffered pain at that graveside. And I choose to believe that God, the creator of the cosmos, continues to weep and feel our pain with us too. But that's not where this sermon ends, because that's not where this story ends either. And so I need to ask you to stay with me for just another couple of minutes. Yes, Jesus does sit and weep with us while we are grieving. But Jesus is also so much more than that. In his dialogue with Martha in the story, Jesus proclaims, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And those who live and believe in me will never die." Remember when I said that John's Jesus is a little more cryptic and confusing than Jesus is in some of the other Gospels? This is a little hard to understand. What is he talking about? And what does it really mean when Jesus says, "Believe in me"? That is a question that we could spend our entire lives trying to figure out, and I'm sorry that I don't have a quick, easy answer to give you. But what we do have in this story is an example in the character of Martha and the relationship between her and Jesus that is evidenced in their exchange. She responds to Jesus by saying, "Yes, I do believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God." And earlier she says, "I know that God will give you whatever you ask." Martha is confessing her utmost belief in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and says that he is the Messiah, the one who would liberate Israel. Martha believes in Jesus. But after they cry and go to the tomb of her brother, and Jesus asks for the stone to be taken away, we see that even Martha doesn't quite grasp it fully. She protests by saying, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days. 1 day longer than Jesus is in the grave for later." Friends, I don't always know what it means to believe in Jesus. I say that I believe in Jesus, but do I really understand what that means? To believe in Jesus as the resurrection and the life? Do I really know what it means to believe that Jesus holds power over death? Not always. Not in the moments when my grief and anger and heartache over the death of someone I love still have a hold on me. Still, Martha's hesitation doesn't stop Jesus from showing her what he means and literally calling Lazarus back to life. And Jesus doesn't stop there either. You see, this episode is a pivotal moment in the entirety of the Gospel of John. It is the turning point from Jesus' public ministry towards the story of the Passion narrative. Raising Lazarus foreshadows Jesus' own resurrection on Easter Sunday. Jesus tells us that he is the resurrection of the light and the life, shows us by calling Lazarus back to life, and then shows us again by proving that death does not have the final say. Beloved, Jesus is calling us to life. Not just life after death, but to life here and now. Those who believe in Jesus are called to live life, knowing that death does not have final victory over us, but that Jesus has defeated death and will one day, all will be restored. We say that we believe these things, but sometimes we don't truly understand what it means. And even when it is difficult to believe this, when the physical earthly death of someone that we love makes us think that we can't go on much longer, and when grief overwhelms us, Jesus is nothing but patient. In those moments of our deepest despair, Jesus Christ, the resurrection and the life, will sit and weep with us too. May it be so.